you ever heard the Dark Discussions podcast? I threw it on today. They were talking about the Kevin Smith film Tusk. And what's better at Halloween time than hearing other people that love horror movies talk about horror movies? Well, on this episode of the Countdown to Halloween, I'm not going to give you one thing. I'm going to give you a bunch of things. I'm going to tell you about some of the great podcasts that you can drive around and listen to that will give you a Halloween bone steady for your ears. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense, but I'm just fucking stringing words together. See you on the other side, pricks.
Listen to them. Children of the night. What music they make.
Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
I got news for you, pal. You ain't leading but two things right now. Jack and shit. Jack left town. I say, yo, flip him. Do what? Flip him. Flip him for real.
Y'all think us folks from the country's real funny like, don't you? Jerry, hello from you, Ma. I'm Mr. Britt. I've got to give me education, Jerry. You
Ass. Death. A bitch.
What's up, y'all? This is Dynamo Mars. Anytime you make a list like this, I'm part of such a huge and amazing podcasting community. I run the chance of forgetting someone, and because I don't have a small midget to follow me around and electrocute me with a cattle prod every time I fuck it up, I forget things all the time. I did have a midget. He was really nice, but now we are in the midst of a sexual harassment trial, and it's terrible. Apparently midgets have rights. Who knew? And apparently they don't like to be called midgets. So I don't know. And apparently they don't like to be called, hey, little sexy foxy man, come prod me with something else. I didn't know, Your Honor. I had no idea. So you're driving around, you're thinking about horror, but your friends are all square normies that don't like horror. Your friends that like horror are, not riding around with you in your 5.5 hour round trip weekly commute to work. What are you going to do? Go on the internet and find friends that talk about horror. Now, before anybody gets their panties in a bunch, what I'm talking about right now is horror podcasts, not any other podcast. So if you are my brothers from another mother over at the Gentleman Guide to Midnight Cinema, or the super smart and ultra foxy dames over at the Feminine Critique, or even my buddies Jake and CDR at the Cult of Muscle, this isn't a list about you, so you won't be on the list. See what I did there? That's why I'm a professional. So let's talk horror podcasts. While not a horror podcast, the podcast that got this idea rolling in my head, and he is knee deep in his own 31 Days of Halloween countdown, is my good buddy El Goro and Talk Without Rhythm. El Goro sounds like the illegitimate child of Shadow Stevens and Joey Styles. He fits so much fucking knowledge into every little review he gives, and he sounds like a radio guy. He sounds slick. This is a good intro show for you if you've only ever listened to terrestrial radio, because you could put El Goro on any show and he would sound like he belongs. He doesn't always talk about horror, but right now, like I said, he's going through the 31 Days of Halloween. Check it out. One of my faves, maybe my number one go-to podcast, Bloody Good Horror, featuring author Casey Kurzweil, beer aficionado Joe, the ultra smart John Snars, who has 22 C's in his name, and the young, tiny Fighting Newell brothers. Every week or so, They give you a review of what's generally a contemporary theatrical release. They're smart. They're funny. It's a great sounding show. Bloody Good Horror. Speaking of great friends, let's take a trip over to deepest, darkest, terrifying, depressing, awful, ugly, would rather be in war-torn World War II Europe, Long Island, for my good friends Joe and Tom over at the House of Horror podcast. House of Horror, I say it a million times, is neat because I think these two are out of their fucking mind most of the time. Because they're way younger than me, which almost everybody is, their takes on horror films are entirely different than mine. Are you a 20-something that thinks it's funny that Monster Zero likes the original Hills Have Eyes and thinks it's Wes Craven's original favorite film? Well, maybe this is the show for you. Even though I don't always, I should say, I do a lot. Even though I don't always agree with these guys, they are smart. They are filmmakers, so they have a really interesting perspective. They're great guys, but most importantly, they know their fucking movies. So the House of Horror podcast is definitely a good one. You want to laugh your ass off and hear a lot about movies? Go check out Night of Living podcast. These guys are so fucking great. You will feel like you're hanging out with your friends. Night of Living podcast is your favorite podcast. Highest recommendations here. Great Halloween listening. If you are a fan like I am of horror films, you're going to want to listen to Casey Kurzweil from Bloody Good Horror's 1951 Down Place. It is the Hammer Films podcast where they take you from everything from Dracula to Robin Hood and wacky old dark house comedies and everything that the Hammer catalog offers. Highest recommendations to that film. Now, everyone knows our relationship that listens to Trick or Treat Radio. Everyone knows our relationship with Bill and Chris from Outside the Cinema. They don't always review horror, but they kind of always review horror. They find a reason for it to stick it in there, whether they mean to or not. And these guys know their shit, but they're real people. That's what I like the most about them. You know, you'll find 100 shows on iTunes featuring standoffish dicks. These are real people. They're dicks as well, but they're also real people. I love them. Very opinionated, great ideas. I highly recommend Outside the Cinema. I'm going to recommend one more for you now. That is canceled as far as I know. It is called Double Murder. It was on the Bloody Disgusting Network, but I just looked recently, and I think you can still get the individual episodes on iTunes. It was awesome. They would take a contemporary remake and compare and contrast it to its original. It was a fucking great horror podcast. It's missed. I hope it comes back. Even better if it comes back on its own. Big fan of that. So that's some great Halloween podcast listening for you guys to listen to. Sayonara, suckers. Happy Halloween.